First of all, excuse my nasal accent on top of my Czech accent, but I'm suffering from a bad case of allergies. So if you need subtitles, just raise your hand. Now, before I start, I would like to put on a hat of the chief cheerleader of BBLA, and I would like to congratulate SVU and other organizations for events like this, because we as BBLA support them also financially, and it's terrific to see that they do these programs, so thank you so much. Okay, start the clock. So as you can tell, I was born in 1982. That makes me 34. And but anyhow, okay. So let me start. So I'll start with my family. I found a couple of photographs here. Most of them are actually with my mom. So it's my parents, me, and Meďa Beďa. Obviously, you know Meďa Beďa down there. What's interesting is that my father, who was 12 years older than my mom, in 1948 spent a couple of months in Vienna. And when he came back after the communists took over the country, he was arrested and then spent 7 years in the labor camp in uranium mines in Jáchymov. Then he got out, met my mother, then I was born, but his health was really deteriorating, and then he started falling apart, and then he suffered and died. So I just wanted to share that with you, because that somehow probably formed my opinion of the communist regime, and I understood as a kid that the communist propaganda was not all roses. So quickly, a couple of photographs from my childhood. The young pyrotechnic playing with fire. I always loved speed and animals. Here, I guess I was trying to be in charge of some train station establishment, my animals. But I'll start with one sort of relevant picture. All the students in the former Czechoslovakia had to participate in these summer work camps, picking hops for local breweries. And it was for the very first time where I realized that it would be something that I would want to do, and that is escape from former Czechoslovakia. And I started discussing this with my closest friends, and actually this photograph was sent to me a couple of years ago by one of my classmates, who kind of remembered that during this trip I was keen to express my desire to escape. A couple of years later, with a good friend of mine, a guy I knew from my childhood, we were able to participate in a skiing trip to Austria, to Schladming. We actually somehow managed to get all these 10 or 12 approvals from 10 or 12 different organizations like police, military, and all that stuff, and were allowed to travel, because we discovered about this trip at the very last moment. There were still a couple of seats available on that bus, and we just went to all these offices and all these bureaus individually, and we persuaded those people to give us the stamps, and somehow we were lucky to get it. So we go to Austria. Once we got to the facility where we were supposed to be staying, one of the girls on the bus immediately transferred her things into a waiting car and disappeared. And then later on, we actually found out that out of 48 students participating in this trip, about 19 disappeared over the period of the week. So Michael and I, one day, we wanted to ski, and we sort of skied for a couple of days, but then we left our skis in a snow and hitchhiked to the suburbs of Salzburg, and there we met a couple of young people, and we actually stayed with one of their families for a couple of days, and the father of one of the girls we stayed with was the professor at the university in Salzburg, and he figured out that if we applied for the asylum in Austria, we would have to go to this refugee camp near Vienna, Traiskirchen, and he thought that we might be stuck there for even a couple of years. So he figured out that the best way for us would be to cross the border to Germany and then apply for the asylum in Germany, in Bonn, at that time the capital of Germany. So they drove our luggage across the border, showed us where to cross, and then they met us at the other side of the border, bought us beer and sausages and put us on a train. And we actually ended up in Bonn, applied for asylum. We were kept for only a couple of weeks by the police in this small refugee camp. And then we actually got all the permits. I was also interviewed by the American Army because at that time I studied at the Technical University. And it was mandatory to also be the member of the military forces. I mean, they taught us how to build bridges, the soldiers taught us how to blow them up. So it was just part of the procedure. So we were approved, we could stay in Germany, and the very first encounter with the Western world really was our very first trip to the city of Cologne. It's a very, very large city, and I must tell you, and this is a true story, for first couple of hours we were concerned because all the Westerners that we saw, I mean a lot of people in the streets, they were dressed in a strange way, they were loud, they behaved strangely. Then we realized it was the annual carnival in Cologne. So we were not so, you know, I mean it's true story. So then let me just move to Germany. So this is our first apartment that we shared in Bonn. This is probably 6 months later. We bought this absolutely beat up car with our first money we got from our work. Michael, the buddy I left with, is the blonde guy. This is another friend of ours. During the rough times in Germany. This is actually before I was leaving for Canada, because I stayed there for less than 2 years, and I applied for the Canadian asylum, and finally I got it. So I got this monkey from my German girlfriend. The monkey's on top, I'm down there, and this is the very last sort of moments in Germany, and this was already on this continent. As you can see, I still love animals, and we were reading some sort of a book there together. But what I wanted to share with you is not this sort of simple escape. I mean, first of all, I have to share with you that my absolute admiration goes especially to those who escaped after the war. And I had a chance to speak with some of them, people that escaped into bombed out Germany, and that must have been really horrendous. But let me just share a quick story about my friend Michael. So after we left, he tried to get his wife out of Czechoslovakia. He got married maybe 3 years prior to our escape. His wife Zuzana planned to participate in a trip to Yugoslavia, and then through Yugoslavia at that time it was possible to escape and then join us, and then my girlfriend Hanička at that time. Obviously after we left, her passport was confiscated, And so the only thing we could do was we sent postcards to our families and our friends, specifically telling them this must surprise you, but we decided to stay in Austria and in Germany, just to make sure that they would not be harassed by the police. So they would not the police would not think that our family members and friends knew about our escape, and then they somehow participated in planning this. So I was already on my way to Canada when Michael came up with this brilliant idea, and he found a German girl who looked similar, had similar features as his wife, Susanna. And then the German girl managed to get a new German passport with a photograph of real Susanna, who was still in the Czech Republic. Then our friend Ralph rented a car and drove to Prague. And the idea was that they would meet in Prague, so they did meet in Prague. And the German girl took a bus trip to Prague. Even during the communist regime, it was very common that especially over the weekends, you would see busloads of young people from Germany or Austria visiting Prague. 2 more minutes, come on. So they met, Susanna got the passport, hopped in a car with Ralph, they drove to the border, they were followed by a couple of cars, and at the border they were arrested, so the police knew about it. They were in a prison, Ralph for about 6 months, he was going crazy. The German girl was kicked out a couple of months later, and Susan spent almost 2 years in a prison. But Michael made some contacts with the Red Cross in Germany, so at some point he managed to get Susanna out. Almost 4 years later, they reunited, they had a son, and about 6 years ago, they divorced as friends, but everything is happy. So my time is up, so thank you.
Thank you so much.